Welcome to Around the Campfire with AmeriCamp, the ultimate summer camp podcast. I'm Jen and Happy New Year, everyone. It's early Jan here in the office and we're super excited that it is going to be the year that everyone's going to camp, which is amazing. And I've got a very special guest with me today for the first episode of the new year. I have Ryan Ludden, the Executive Vice President of Sprintax. Hi, Ryan.
Hi, Jen. Great to be here. Thanks everyone for tuning into this. We've got a lot of exciting tax information to share with you all today.
Yeah, I think with it being the new year, tax is definitely kind of on everyone's mind, especially those that have went to camp for the first time this past year, and then obviously all of those returners as well. So it's definitely something that we need to make sure that everyone's informed on and that everyone kind of gets right for the kind of tax season opening up at the end of Jan. So we'll be here giving everyone a lot of information, kind of chatting through. Tax is quite a scary subject, so it's just to kind of alleviate any kind of anxiety there. And as I say, Ryan, you're obviously the expert, so you'll be able to kind of make sure that everyone has all the information that they need for the upcoming tax season. Yeah. For those that haven't met you before, I don't know if you want to kind of let everyone know sort of what you do at Sprintax and a bit about your background as well.
Absolutely, Jen. So I would probably say with all of your camp audience that are tuning in to this session, I probably have something in common with you all in that I did a J program myself many years ago. I did a J1 intern visa. I also did international student visa to the US. So I know the excitement of heading to the US, having that experience. I also know how it feels like maybe a little bit of a daunting feeling when the word tax is mentioned, because it can certainly be a scary topic, and hopefully that's what we'll bring you through today. But Sprintax are an online software, and our job is to help non-residents, international campers, international folks on their J's, or international students to figure out the sometimes confusing and daunting world of US taxes. So we help to prepare your US federal and state tax returns through our online platform.
For those that have went to camp this past year, it might be the first time that you sort of were informed about tax or sort of have stepped into the kind of employment world, and obviously that goes hand in hand with lots of different kinds of taxes. So I think it might be helpful if we just kind of start explaining kind of why participants on the Camp Counsellor program need to pay tax, the kind of taxes that they pay as well, just so that they understand what a tax return is sort of on the flip side. So are you able to kind of give everyone a little bit of background on that as well?
Yeah, absolutely, Jen. I guess the first things first, when you get that stamp, that US visa in your passport, you'll see the small terms and conditions that you need to oblige by all US laws, and your US tax filing obligations are one of those. So in essence, it's part of maintaining, your immigration status. It's the law. I don't want to scare folks too much by saying that, but it's almost part and parcel of your experience in the US. If you earn US taxable income, so if you're getting your camp wages, then that is generally subject to US federal tax. And depending on where you are in the US, there's 50 states. A lot of those also have different state tax laws. So you can expect to see taxes being withheld on your paycheck that you get from your employer. So yeah, in essence, filing your tax return, it's part of the experience in one way. It's a welcome to the USA, welcome to the US tax system, but it is part of the program. If you do earn taxable US income, you generally need to file a tax return as a non-resident.
Yeah, and I think that for those from the UK, it's very similar to sort of what you would pay like national insurance. It's an amount that is sort of incorporated into your paycheck. It's not a huge amount. It wasn't a huge amount when I was at camp. Obviously, it does completely depend, as you say, Ryan, on those kind of state factors. But it's just the sort of worldly process of what happens in the working world. Unfortunately, tax is just part of that. But it definitely needs to be something that you sort of know to expect that, and you know that it kind of comes hand in hand with that sort of program. So I think it's really helpful to give everyone a bit of a heads up on that. It's something that I think when I personally went to camp, I didn't really have any idea of kind of what to do afterwards, and you just kind of think that obviously you're visiting a country that you don't live in, so you don't really know sort of what, again, the sort of after connotations of that are. So in terms of the sort of background with the kind of tax side of things, so I know that there's obviously like tax periods and it kind of changes country to country. So are you able to sort of enlighten myself and our listeners on that kind of tax period and sort of when taxes are paid and all that fun side of things? You're the expert. I'm so glad.
Happy to, Jen. I suppose it's a little bit probably strange maybe for your campers who have returned home in 2024, and all of a sudden tax filing season is actually starting, towards the end of January. So the periods, the IRS, which is the US federal tax authorities, what they're concerned about is anything that's happened between January 1st, 2024 and December 31st, 2024. So if you were present in the US just for a single day in 2024, or whether it was the entire 365 days, all of that time, all of the US income that you earned during that time is what the IRS, the tax authorities, are concerned about for this filing season. So when you're filing your tax return, the easiest way to explain it is it's like balancing the books with the tax authorities. You're saying, hey, my name is Ryan. Here's all the US income that I earned from my camp employer. Here's the total income I received. Here's the tax that was withheld in that on that income. And by filing your return, you're balancing the books to see, did you overpay tax during that year? As a result, you could be due back a tax refund. Or did you underpay tax during that period of time? And as a result of that, you might owe the IRS some money back to balance that books. That is, essentially the timelines you're looking at. When you're filing your tax return in 2025, the deadline set by the IRS is April 15th. That's the deadline to file and pay any taxes you owe to the IRS, which is the federal tax authorities. A lot of the states have that similar deadline of April 15th. Some might be a little bit beforehand, some might be a little bit after, but a lot of them follow the IRS deadline date as well.
And I think the amazing thing with Sprintax is that obviously you don't have to worry about, oh my goodness, how do I do this? How do I go about it? What do I need? It's all sort of packaged together. So it's really sort of easy to follow because, again, I'm personally not a very mathematical person, and the idea of having to be completely independently in charge of doing my taxes terrifies me slightly. So in terms of like having that platform, I think that that's really fantastic, that it's obviously a software that allows our kind of participants and also any participant. So you work with kind of all sponsors, all programs. That's correct, isn't it, Ryan? Perfect.
Yes, absolutely. So, if you've got if you're a J1 camp counselor, or if a buddy of yours is a J1 summer work and travel, or someone was a J1 intern, in a lot of cases, the IRS will classify those as a non-resident for tax, and maybe that might be point Q for my next explanation of what that is, because you've probably heard the word non-resident a few times now. But yes, Sprintax can help everyone on their international J1 program and also international students essentially we just serve the world's non-residents with their US tax obligations.
And we appreciate you for that. So yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of different kind of terms and things like that can be a little bit confusing. So it'd be great to kind of chat through some of those terminologies, and then we can jump into kind of what is actually required and sort of what that kind of tax refund process filing looks like, just to kind of help. We are getting a lot of questions, especially as it comes into the turn of January, so we can kind of jump into specifics as well.
Yeah, so maybe let me start with that non-resident term, because it might not sound all too friendly, but it's just the way the IRS describe different folks who are on particular visas. So if you're a J1 camp staff, your DS 2019 will probably describe you as a J1 camp counselor. Generally a J1 camp counselor, J1 work and travel participant, an intern, even an au pair, the US tax authorities would generally classify you as a non-resident for tax purposes. Because, Ryan is maybe a UK tax resident or an Irish tax resident, but he's only going to the US for a short period of time and then returning back. So the IRS are saying, okay, if you're a J1 camp counselor, they generally treat you as a non-resident for tax for a set period of time. They give you 2 years where they will classify you as a non-resident for tax purposes. If you're present for 1 day in the year, the IRS will count that as one of your years. So just remember that as well.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And then I suppose if you're saying, okay, well, what does that really mean? I'm a non-resident for tax. Basically, if you were on camp this past summer and you look to your left and maybe your boss was an American citizen, they are generally treated as a resident for tax purposes. When it comes to filing your taxes, your US citizen boss or work colleague, they will file a different type of return. They will file the resident form for their US taxes, whereas you as a non-resident would need to file a different tax form, which is called the 1040 NR. Your US citizen folks will file a 1040. If you can put money down or a bet on what NR stands for, non-resident. But yes, in short, you need to file different tax forms, and also you are taxed differently. You are treated differently when it comes to your US taxes, because there are different credits or deductions that you're not eligible to claim as a non-resident. So you're treated differently from a tax perspective as someone on their J1 program who is still within that 2-year period. I won't go too technical, but if you were present in the US for longer than that 2-year period, the IRS, again, the US federal tax authorities, they'll start counting your days of presence in the US towards something called a substantial presence test. It's like some crazy science experiment. But if you were present for 183 days or more from your 3rd year on, then you actually could be long enough where you are deemed substantially present in the US, where now you could file as a resident for tax. So things change maybe in your 3rd year. But that's something that the Sprintax software helps to simplify a lot. We have our own residency analysis. You just pop in your visa details, your visits to the US, and we actually confirm this for you. So, Jen, you said you're not a mathematical person. You don't need to get the calculator out for that.
Fantastic. Yeah, we do have, again, obviously we do first timers, direct placements, returners. So we have quite a few returners. Quite a lot of them are like 3rd year plus at this point. So definitely kind of going into that realm, as you say, of that kind of step up. So I think especially if you've been doing it one way for a few years and that changes, it can be a bit of an adjustment. So it's great that, as I say, the Sprintax software kind of does that for you, and just kind of makes things a lot simpler as well. Also, something that's interesting is that we get a lot of questions about like being paid at camp, which obviously, as I say, links into the kind of topic of the aftermath of payment in terms of taxes. So I personally got paid. We were set up with American bank accounts, but obviously some camps will do like checks and things like that. I think it's important to know that regardless of how you get paid, tax is still something that's going to be present within that. And I think that that's something that is important to be noted, that regardless, even if you're maybe not set up with a bank account, it's still all done through your camp and you working in the US, and that still absolutely needs to be done after your summer.
Yeah, and to add to that, Jen, like we work with a lot of folks, particularly au pairs who actually generally get paid directly from their host family, where taxes aren't withheld. So if you think about it, if you're not getting taxed enough during your employment, when we're filing our tax return, that's when we're balancing the books. We're saying, hey, I got $1,000 here. It didn't have any tax withheld on it. So, you can imagine 10% of that we need to pay back to the IRS to balance that out. So, that's probably a good way to think about, what filing a tax return is. It's giving the tax authorities, the landscape of, here's all the income I received during the year, whether it was into my bank, whether tax was withheld, or whether I just got, cash or a check into my hand. But we're reporting that income. The IRS is kind of saying, okay, based on the tax tables, 10% should have been coming out of this income, and then we might need to pay that back. Or, you might have paid enough income, you might have paid more in tax, and that's how you might be due a refund back. So hopefully that explains just, again, the reasoning behind filing a tax return based on what you've been doing and what you've been earning throughout the year.
So yes, for anyone, again, UK based, it's, from my interpretation, it's a bit like a P60. Would you say? Okay, perfect. Just so that we're on the same page. So it will kind of break down, as I say, your role at camp, sort of all of your earnings, and as I say, the kind of taxable side of that as well. So just kind of gives you all that information to be able to do your tax return. And now you did say earlier, Ryan, that the deadline is April 15th, which means that from sort of that end of January, you've got the whole of February, the whole of March to kind of get that completed. If we are able to kind of chat through what that involves, kind of documentation, what I would need if it was myself that was doing that this year, just to kind of simplify that process and just give everyone a little bit more of a walkthrough for those doing it for the first time as well, I think would be really helpful.
Yeah, so I suppose if you're using it for the first time, particularly, if you wanted to, if you absolutely love taxes and new non-resident tax like the back of your hand, you could download a 1040NR off the IRS website and try and fill in, your information. You'll quickly notice that it's quite complex. It's not something that's very straightforward, which is why kind of Sprintax is there to help you. What we do is we turn what can be a very daunting couple of pages into an online questionnaire. So the checklist that I would say first before you start the process of using Sprintax is dedicate some time to this. I wouldn't be multi-screening. I wouldn't have Netflix on in front of me and also, my phone and triple screening while I'm doing my taxes. Just set, 30 minutes aside, a quiet place, maybe put on the kettle and have a cup of tea for yourself with a snack to keep the energy levels up. But things that you would need are, your income documents. So your W-2 would be your income documents. On that note, if you cannot for any reason get W-2, it's just not possible. Your last paycheck is something that Sprintax can use that information on. So your last paycheck could help there, but W-2 would be much more preferred. Your visa information, so that the stamp on your passport. So have your passport beside you, your DS 2019, which you might still have. I'm sure you all remember, you have that to hand and have a copy of it as well. Your visits in and out of the US. Usually you can get your visits on I-94.gov. That lists your visits over the last 5 years. If it's something beyond that, you might have tickets in your email that might show your entry, your intended entry and exit dates. So that's probably some of the information I would say you'd need. Information about, your income, information about you, your visa, your travel, and we will then start to walk you through a questionnaire. So we start to confirm, okay, is Ryan still a non-resident for tax? This is Ryan's first year on his J1 camp. It's his first time in the US. He's, a non-resident for tax. Has Ryan earned income? Yes, he has. You can then upload a digital copy of your W-2 directly into Sprintax, and we'll punch in that financial details for you. We'll then confirm, where in the US were you? Were you in Boston? Were you in New York? Were you in Wisconsin, Illinois? Anywhere and everywhere. We ask you that because we need to figure out, is there any state taxes that you might need to file as well? So we have everything under the one roof. While we're figuring out your US federal tax obligations, we're also looking at whether you need to file a state. So there are questions along the way. And then at the very end, we'll tell you, okay, this is what you are, this is what we've found that you need to file. That's very likely going to be a federal tax return, including the 8843 form, which is just a declaration of your non-resident status. And if you need to do a state return, we'll let you know, and you can add that on. So once you go through those steps, there'll be a checkout at the end. Once you go through the payment stage, we'll generate the tax packs. We'll populate those tax return forms, and you might even be able to electronically file the federal tax return through our system, because we do have e-filing available on the system, so that you could send that electronically from London or Newcastle or Sunderland. If you're back home, you could basically be sending that over from your couch.
Amazing. So yeah, I think that one of the biggest ones is that DS 2019. I think a lot of people will go and think that I need this for going to camp, and we've had people bin them, we've had people lose them, because obviously you just think that you do need it for that immigration, and then you're kind of good and sorted. But I think hot tip is definitely photocopy it, kind of have one. I photocopied it, kept my photocopy at home, and then I had my original in my passport. So I was just very kind of wary about kind of having different ones as well. So I think that that's a really important thing, that it's something that you really do. And it's great, as I say, that it's that kind of questionnaire. It's really simplified. It walks you sort of through that. And those documents, as I say, are all things that you should have to hand. The W-2 is obviously something that your camp will provide. But everything else is electronically done through Sprintax. So it means that you don't have to do too much mental maths, and it's all kind of done for you, which is great.
And to add to that, obviously there might be some questions that might be a little bit tricky. Do note that we have, through tax season, we've got live chat that run through 24/7 shifts. So if you have a question on something that's on the system, you're not entirely sure, there is a chat feature there that is there to help support. We also have our email support, hello@sprintax.com. And then on the back of that, we've got tons of online blogs, J1 Tax Guide blogs, J1 Tax videos. There's webinars that will be running throughout the tax season that you can hop into for free and get a really detailed overview of your tax obligations. If today's talk is not enough tax talk for you.
That leads into another FAQ of ours, actually, Ryan, which is a lot of participants are concerned with, well, what happens if I don't file that tax return, or what if historically, say last year, 2023, they hadn't filed one? What kind of repercussions did that have? Especially if they're looking to do more J1 programs in future, or even work in the US long term with their kind of career in general. It would be great to outline that as well.
Sure, and I'm definitely not here to scare folks. So what I always say is, if you've missed a year or you filed as a resident by mistake, I always say, don't panic. take a deep breath, but let's set the record straight, because we don't know how that might impact us in years to come. If you haven't filed a tax return, you can always backfile. So Sprintax actually has, if you go on the Sprint right now, you can file for the last 3 or 4 years.
Oh, great.
And if you were due a refund, the IRS are actually happy to issue a refund back to you if that was within the last 3 years. So you could potentially be due a refund back, but I wouldn't even think about a refund there. It's important to backfile. If you owe taxes, if you file your taxes after that deadline, the IRS are, they are allowed to impose some interest on the amount that you might owe. So there might be some late filing penalties there. Nothing absolutely monumental, I wouldn't say, depending on the amount you owe and the amount of time. But set the record straight. You can backfile directly on the system. If you filed using a resin software by mistake, whether it's TurboTax or maybe H&R Block, you can file what's called an amended tax return. It's called a 1040X. Sprintax also has an amended online return preparation facility. So you can actually go online and say, hey, I need to correct my return from 22 or 23 or 24. Please, essentially we'll run you through the questionnaire. We'll outline the information from your incorrect return. We'll base that information, will show what it should have been, and essentially the difference is what the 1040X will list. So help is on hand if you need to backfile, help is on hand if you need to amend. And I would say it really isn't worth it if you're going to misfile, to try and get, a refund back. It might sound great today, but I would plead for you all just to think more long term with this and think about your taxes from a compliance standpoint. That's all I would say. I don't have a globe to tell you exactly what might happen if you don't file or misfile, but I would say, particularly with another administration coming in, that we just don't know what repercussions lie ahead.
Totally, yeah. And I think it's just really important to kind of be by the book. You never know if it's going to impact like immigration, if it might impact if you're getting like a different visa in future. As you say, there is kind of no way to know if there would be repercussions with that. But it's definitely best to kind of, it's obviously a law-abiding practice to do your tax returns, and we absolutely encourage you to do that. We're making it as simple as possible, obviously using the Sprintax software to be able to do that. So it may sound like quite an intimidating task, but as I say, from the kind of run through we've done, hopefully it's alleviated a lot of anxieties and things like that there. So yeah, thank you so much, Ryan. I think this has been like a great overview for anyone that's sort of not sort of knowledgeable on this side of things, that's maybe doing their tax return for the first time. For anyone that doesn't know, Sprintax is our all things tax Oracle partner. So they are fantastic and they're here to help you. AmeriCamp is not an accountant. Me specifically, definitely not, but in terms of our knowledge, is definitely kind of camp based as opposed to tax based. So any specific questions regarding tax, we will direct you to Sprintax, and they have a fabulous team over there that are able to kind of answer any questions and assist. And Ryan's obviously mentioned all of the different kind of information points that they have as well. But we obviously have that affiliation link with our wonderful partner Sprintax, which we will put in the description of this episode. In terms of AmeriCamp in general, we will be sending out a lovely tax information email in the sort of next week or so in preparation for tax season opening up at the end of January. And Ryan, if you're able just to let everyone know the kind of website to go to if they're not, if they don't have the link handy, and just kind of what you've got going on as well.
Yeah, so I guess for AmeriCamp, we also have a discount code, which you'll be able to use at the checkout. It's a federal discount code. It will knock $5 off your federal return cost. I think that is capitals AC 50F524, but we'll put that in the emails and the description. But the sprintax.com is the website. Do follow the AmeriCamp link. You'll get communications from Jen and the team. That'll give you access to the specific AmeriCamp Sprintax website, and then you'll be able to pop in that discount code at the end. But yeah, it is quite straightforward, but there are going to be some times where you'll have to think. There are some times that you'll have to have documents ready. So, my only tip is just set yourself some time. It's an important thing to do. Get it squared off so you can take a deep breath and relax and not stress and leave it until the last minute. I would also say do not wait until April 14th to file your taxes. You will lose hair or you will go grey like me. So, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, great advice. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Ryan. I hope that everyone's learned a lot more. And yeah, as I say, new tax season, new AmeriCamp season for working at a camp in the US. It's amazing and we're really excited. So thank you so much for joining us and we'll speak to you soon. Bye.
Thanks, Jen. Take care, everyone.